Hey guys, Chris here. Today I'm giving you my quick review, my one take on the Porsche Taycan Sport Turismo rear wheel drive. I've only had this car for about a day. It's going to be a little bit of a one take, a quick review, and that is because, well, I only have it for one day, and that is because this is the loaner that Porsche gives me when my own Taycan Cross Turismo is at service, which is pretty darn awesome. With other luxury brands, you get something like a lesser of a model. Maybe if you have your e-tron at service, you get something like an A3, an A1, maybe a Volkswagen Polo. But when you have your Porsche at service, they give you another Porsche. So let's start off this review by talking about the exterior design, because it is a little bit different than the Cross Turismo. And if you're not familiar with the Cross Turismo, I have a bunch of videos here on the channel about my own car. But starting off, this color is called Jet Black, a no-cost option, and it's equipped with the 21-inch Spider wheels. And I think this combo is just super nice and super clean with the matte black details you can see here on the front, on the side, around the windows. And this also has no panoramic sunroof and no roof rails. And I think it just looks super clean. If I were to spec a Sport Turismo, I would probably spec it this way to differentiate it from the Cross Turismo, which is kind of a dime a dozen where I live here in Oslo. The Cross Turismo also has black cladding around the wheel arches. You don't have that here. So the overall look is just super clean. Maybe it's a little bit stealth in black. If you option this, or I mean spec this in white or a lighter color, you would see a big difference between this and a normal Cross Turismo. Or this is actually the normal car, because this is the base model. The Cross Turismo, even though that was introduced first, is actually a model above this. So this has rear wheel drive. With the performance battery pack, you're getting like 408 horsepower with launch mode and 326 horsepower under normal driving. 0 to 100 kilometers an hour, 5.4 seconds. Doesn't sound fast, but in typical Porsche fashion, that 5.4 seconds, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour feels much faster than any other electric car I have driven. This also has a 2-speed transmission on that rear axle, meaning that once you get above 100 kilometers an hour, it actually shifts gears and you kind of get like a boost in acceleration. And above 100 kilometers an hour, this accelerates and is so much faster than any other electric car I've driven, with only 326 horsepower. That only does 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 5.4 seconds. It just feels much faster than anything else. The same goes for when you go up in the model range also, if you go to a Cross Turismo 4 or a 4S or a Turbo. They just feel super fast and rapid. This black color is really nice, and especially from the rear 3/4 with these beefy 21-inch Spider wheels, it's just really nice. And look how fat these are. These are 305 millimeters wide in the rear. Not the best for efficiency and range, but since this is the rear wheel drive model, you're getting a little bit more range than with the 4-wheel drive model. I think, well, I'm going to put all the numbers on the screen now because I actually haven't researched that for this video. Again, I only have this car for a day, less than a day actually. I picked it up yesterday evening and just been doing chores, and then now I found time to make a video. But let me know what you think about the looks of this car compared to the Cross Turismo. Do you prefer this, or do you prefer the Cross Turismo? I think I actually prefer this look. It's so cool. It's just so stealthy. I mean, it looks like a Cross Turismo. It's the same car, just with a little bit different details, but I think it just looks really nice. Before I show you guys the interior, let's show you the trunk of this car, because the big reason to get something like a Taycan Cross Turismo or Sport Turismo is the added practicalities. So electronic liftgate, power liftgate, you can open it with the key. This car also has comfort access, which means you can lock the car from the trunk. It also has, comfort access is keyless entry, where you don't have to press any buttons on the key. The trunk isn't the biggest in liters or in volume, but it's actually a very practical shape because of this big hatch opening. It is very accessible. Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you think this is a hatchback or a station wagon? I think this is a station wagon, but if you think it's a hatchback, let me know in the comment section down below. You can also remove this partial shelf, fold down the rear seats, giving you a lot more load capacity. I'm going to overlay a photo here where it's filled up with winter wheels, and it's actually quite big. I didn't think I was going to fit all the winter wheels in this car. You have a little bit of underfloor storage here, but because this car is equipped with the Bose sound system, that is basically useless. There isn't a lot of storage there. There's a little bit, but not a lot. So let's walk around here. Before I jump in, I just want to show you that we have an AC charging port on this side. It has a single onboard charger as standard, but you can also get the dual onboard chargers, giving it a maximum charging speed of 22 kilowatts. The DC charging port is on this side. You can also do AC charging here, but this is the DC charging port. So it comes standard with AC on this driver's side and then DC on the passenger side. 270 kilowatts of peak charging speed, 10 to 80% in around 18-19 minutes, and this car does that easily. I've done so many videos on this car and the Audi e-tron GT, which this car is related to. So this is a quite bare bones spec. If you see in my car, my own private car has about 35,000 euros or 350,000 kroners of options. This does not have that. So I'm going to tell you guys what this car does not have that my car has. So first off, you can see that it does not have the upgraded leather interior. This is the standard interior, and that means you get artificial leather plasticky materials on the doors, on the armrest, and it just doesn't look as pretty or is as luxurious as in my car, but it's still very, very nice compared to most cars out there, and everything just feels very, very solid. You can see that this is blank, and that is because this does not have memory seats. I have that on my car, and that is because this car is equipped with the standard seats. I have the 18-way sport seats, which is about, I think, a 2,200 euro option, so they're not cheap, but they give you, well, full adjustability. This only has, you know, the normal, I think this is like an 8-way seat, but it's still very comfortable, though maybe a little bit boring. But that's the thing with Porsches, you can option them to the brim. You can spend a lot of money. And you can see here, this has the Bose sound system, which is something I would recommend to upgrade to. It's actually pretty decent, though maybe not the best sound system. It's actually a very clean sound system that I enjoy listening to. But I mean, the door design, pretty simple, pretty standard stuff. And even though this does not have the leather, it has an interesting insert here with this pattern. So let's take a step inside, because there's a Metro on the outside here making a lot of noise. So this is a very nice interior. Even though this isn't the upgraded leather, I would actually recommend you guys, if you want the full luxury experience from a car that is already quite expensive. I mean, starting price of this car, depending on the market, is north of 85,000 euros, $85,000, and spending a little bit more money on options to get that ultimate luxury experience, in my opinion, is worth it. But it also depends on your budget. If you're getting this car, you know, sparsely equipped, if you're getting a car like this for less than 100,000 euros or $100,000 or a million kroners, you're still getting a really, really nice car for that money. But you can see that, you know, this is the faux leather on the dashboard. It's fine, but I'm used to, like in my car, this is wrapped in really beautiful leather. You have beautiful stitching on this section, here and here, and here, and inside the doors, and here, and here, and on the dashboard. It just looks really, really nice. And the biggest thing for me is that when you don't get the leather interior, this is in plastic. It's not a bad quality plastic, but it's still plastic. But when you get the leather interior, this is actually in leather. So that leather interior is around 4,000 to 4,500 euros, depending on the market. And I think when you're spending this much money on a car, that is something I would absolutely equip this car with, because not only does it feel more luxurious, looks more luxurious, it just smells like an Italian handbag. It's just really, really nice, and I can't wait to get into my car after a day in this car. This feels like kind of plasticky. You do have leather here on the center, but it's, again, not the same leather quality as you get in my car. So this is leather, and I think the same for the rear seats, but everything else here on the outsides of the seats is artificial leather or, well, faux leather. So this has the Sport Chrono package, which is also something I would recommend getting. It's about 1,000 or 1,200 euros. That gives you the chrono clock there on the dashboard, which is really nice, but it gives you a drive mode selector here. We're gonna take this car out on the road, not very long time, tell you what this is like to drive, because this also is more bare bones and basic than my car, which has a lot more options. But there isn't too much to say here. This is typical Porsche Taycan stuff with this beautiful gauge cluster that wraps around. This is one of the coolest features with the Taycan. You also sit very low, which I really love, but at the same time you have great visibility. You have a screen here. Infotainment system is pretty decent. I like that. You have wireless Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with this car. And then you also have your own dedicated screen here for your HVAC system. This is fine to use, but it gets really dusty, as you can see here, and also very fingerprinty. So in my car, I have a microfiber cloth here, which I use all the time to keep this clean. But it's a bit annoying, but if you have a microfiber cloth, it is doable. Now let's take a look at the rear seats. And when we open up the door, you have the same frameless doors as you have in the front, and the closing sound is really solid. There's no rattling, nothing at all. You have the same materials on the rear doors, and if you option this with the upgraded leather interior, this would be leather and this would also be leather. But it's a really nice design. Everything feels super solid. So immediately you can see that this is not the biggest rear seat. The Taycan Sport Turismo, even though it's quite a sizable car on the exterior, it's not the biggest car inside here. It's not too bad. I mean, I have enough knee room here. Headroom is also quite decent. I think if this car had the panoramic sunroof, there would be a little bit less room. But I mean, it's fine here for adults. I'm 5'10" or 178 centimeters, so about an average height for an adult in the West, or maybe a little bit taller. And I'm totally fine here, even for a longer trip. But if you're pushing, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", I think this would be a really tight space for a longer trip. And also, you can see that these seats here are quite massive. And if I close the door now, it is quite dark here in the rear seat when you don't have that panoramic sunroof. So if you plan on carrying a lot of people here in the rear, maybe kids or adults, I would probably option for the panoramic sunroof just to get a little bit more light here. And also, what is really nice is that there is a lot of room here in the footwells, and that is because there's no battery in this section. They've actually removed, well, there's a cutout for your feet here, and that gives you a lot of room for your feet here, even if you have big feet. That's a complaint I have with a lot of electric cars, is that you may have a lot of knee room, but you don't have a lot of foot room in some cars because you can't slide them underneath the front seats. And even though I'm sat very low, I like to sit low, this seat is sat very low, there's plenty of room here. But you can see there is kind of a transmission tunnel here, and this is technically a 5-seater. But I wouldn't like to travel 3 adults in the rear here. That would be really tight. Before we take this out on the road and I'll tell you what it's like to drive, I just want to give a huge thanks to today's video sponsor, Elton, the most awesome charging app if you live in Norway, Sweden, Finland, or Denmark. One charging app, one charging interface, one charging map, and one payment method makes charging in any of these countries super simple. It probably has the best interface for finding chargers, checking out availability, which are occupied, the speed, and also has queue time prediction. How long do you have to wait before a charger is vacant? It is super cool, and if you plan on traveling in Norway, Sweden, Finland, or Denmark this summer or in the future, I would highly recommend you guys to download one from the description box down below. Okay, so let's take this out on the road and I'll tell you what it is like to drive. And stepping into it doesn't feel very different to my car like initially. These seats, though they're not the same seats, feel kind of nice. This car is newer, so they feel a little bit firmer because they haven't been, sat in that much. But other than that, it feels similar in here. There is one thing though. This electric motor here on the rear axle sounds louder and is more noisy than I remember my car being. And I thought that was because this had, the Porsche electric sound, but it doesn't have it. Because when you put it into sport mode, or Sport Plus, there's no more sound. And if it did have that, well, we would hear that. So we're going to put it back into normal. And the first thing about this car, it does not have air suspension. You can equip it with air suspension, but this car in particular does not have air suspension like my personal car. I think that is standard on the Cross Turismo, if I'm not mistaken. So the price delta between a base Sport Turismo and a base Cross Turismo is about 10,000 euros, $10,000, 100,000 kroners. And for that extra money, you are getting a lot of things. You're getting four-wheel drive, you're getting a bigger battery, you're getting air suspension, and a few other things. And if you were to equip this car with those things, well, you can't equip it with everything, because the base rear-wheel drive Taycan Sport Turismo cannot be equipped with all-wheel drive. It's rear-wheel drive only. If you want four-wheel drive in a Sport Turismo, you have to go up to a 4S. And I think when you compare a Cross Turismo 4S and a Sport Turismo 4S, there's very, very little difference when you tick off the same boxes. So just be aware of that. There isn't much of a price difference. So this isn't a car to, well, it's not if you want to save money, except if you get the base model with rear-wheel drive, which is the car we are driving today. And I have to say, I was pretty excited when the guy at the service counter said, you're driving a rear-wheel drive Sport Turismo, because I haven't driven a Sport Turismo and I haven't driven a rear-wheel drive Taycan. And I have to say, on paper, this is the weakest car, but it doesn't feel slower at all. I don't feel that 0.3 of a second difference from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour. It just feels as fast, and the fact that it is rear-wheel drive means that the steering is just a little bit sharper. It just feels a little bit more lively, and also because it's rear-wheel drive, yesterday when I picked this car up, it was wet. Turning off traction control and stability control in this car, it will easily go sideways, and with those wide tires, well, it snaps quite fast. So just be aware that there's a lot of grip until you don't have grip at all, and because this is a big and heavy car, it's not as progressive as, well, say a BMW with rear-wheel drive with an internal combustion engine, but it's still a lot of fun. You can go sideways with a normal Cross Turismo 4. I've done that in the dry. I haven't tried this in the dry, but I have no doubts in my mind that this can break traction on the rear axle. So first thing, as I said, this does not have air suspension, so you can't adjust the suspension height-wise, and it's not as refined. It's not as luxurious of a ride as my Cross Turismo. That may be because there is a difference between Cross and Sport. The Cross is supposed to be a little bit taller, a little bit more comfortable, so it may just be a tuning thing, but I think that air suspension in this car would give it just a little bit more smooth ride. A Taycan is never floaty, even on air suspension. It's always buttoned down. But what you get with this car, which I've noticed, is that you get a little bit more motion over bumps, and it feels more bouncy. So the first thing I noticed, like driving this car just a few hundred meters over bumps, I'm like, oh, that's a bounce on the rear axle that I haven't ever experienced in any Taycan, sedan, or Cross Turismo with air suspension. And I've driven quite a bit of different types. I've driven my 4S, I've driven the Turbo, and I've not driven the Turbo S, and I've not driven the GTS. So again, may just be a tuning issue, but I can't remember the Taycan sedan being this bouncy on air suspension. It's a minor thing, and it's not even a complaint, but just know that if you opt for the air suspension, you're gonna get a little bit better body control, which is better for spirited driving, but you're also going to get just a little bit, 5% more refined ride. But, well, like in Oslo here, we have quite terrible roads, a lot of places, and this is super nice. I mean, there's no complaint except for that small difference. So I have to say, like, this car probably has, I don't know, I'm just gonna guess, it probably has 20,000 euros less options than my car. The leather interior is about 4, and then you have the sport seats is about 2, so that's 6. The panoramic sunroof with the roof rails, that's about 3, so that's 9. Air suspension is probably gonna be another 2 or 3. So I'm guessing when you rally up everything, I have, you know, in my car I have like cosmetic differences, like crayon seat belts, crayon face on the Sport Chrono Clock, upgraded lights. Some of that is cosmetic. So I'm like thinking, like, technically this probably has 15 to 20,000 euros of less options than my car. So that's a lot of saving, and you're getting 95% of that experience. So my takeaway here is that if you live in a place where you don't need all-wheel drive, right? And you want to get into a Taycan as cheap as possible, and you want a little bit practicality, I think the Sport Turismo rear-wheel drive is a really nice sweet spot. So if you live in Germany, if you live in France, Spain, if you live in, warmer sections of the United States, if you live in Asian countries where you don't have cold and winter and snow, you don't need all-wheel drive. This is a really nice car because it's fast enough. You're getting basically the same experience as with the more expensive models without paying out of your nose, or whatever that expression is. And it just looks, there's another Sport Turismo that were really nice. I think that was a GTS, which looks basically the same as this car. It has the same wheels, but they are black painted. You can't get these black painted. They have that chrome bit, or that polished bit on the spokes, but you can have that painted aftermarket. So that's the only difference. So I think overall this is a really sweet package. So let's jump to the conclusion and I'll give you guys my final thoughts. In general, I think the Porsche Taycan, regardless of which model you go for, is probably the best driving electric car there is. I just love it. I've had mine for 1.5 years, and I'm probably going to do a review in not very long. I meant to do a 1-year review on my car, and I just went on a long trip to Trondheim and back again, and it's such a pleasurable car to live with and to drive. And there's a reason that I'm not even thinking of replacing it in the near future until I get my EX90 next year, or maybe I want to order a Lotus Electra, but I want to drive that car before I make my decision, because every time I drive any other car, I drive, Audi e-trons, I drive Mercedes EQSs, or whatever electric car I drive, and I get back into my personal vehicle, I'm like, yeah, this is just the best electric car there is overall for me. It's not the most practical, it's not the most comfortable, it's not the most quiet, but it's something, the combination of everything, just how it drives, how it looks, how it feels, how solid it is, and you're getting that same feeling and package here in this entry level model. And I really think if you don't need 4-wheel drive and you don't want the fastest car, because in my opinion, like a Turbo S is just bragging rights if you have a lot of money, because those cars are so expensive. You can equip them, like to twice what this would cost, or even more. And you're not getting twice the car. You're getting a much faster car, and this being a Porsche, yes, you can option it with so many things. You can, you can have leather on this plastic cover here. You can have leather here. You can have leather inside. I'm not kidding. You can have this in leather, and then you can have this in leather. You can spend about 10, 15,000 euros more above the leather interior and just leather options here and there, and just contrast stitching. You can spend a lot of money on Porsches, and I love that because you can personalize it. And when you're at this level of car, you get really nitpicky on like quality and stuff like that. And that's why I think if you were to get this car, which I think you should, if you don't need 4-wheel drive, you're going to get that added efficiency with only having rear-wheel drive. You're going to get, almost the same performance as a Turismo 4. But there are a few options I would do. I would do with the 21-inch wheels because I just think it looks awesome. I would probably do without the roof rails, but I would probably do the panoramic sunroof, but that is not a must. But a must in this car, in my opinion, I think is the leather interior. These seats are fine. If you have several people driving the car, you may want to go for memory settings. So maybe you want to go for the comfort seats or spend that 2,200 euros on the sports seats. But other than that, Bose sound system as this car has, Sport Chrono, and maybe air suspension. And that's just because you can lower it and make it look even meaner. And here and around Oslo, where we have some terrible roads, and if you have, a very steep driveway, you may want to rise that car because you have, nose lift. The car you can set settings to places around here. And even though I have the Cross Turismo, which is about 1 centimeter riding higher than this car, there are a few speed bumps here where the car will actually will ground out. So I have it set to nose lift. a few different places. So that is really dependent on where you live, but you're going to get a little bit more refined ride. But other than that, you don't need more fancy options. And I really think you can spec one of these nicely for less than 100,000 euros or 100,000 kroners. Well, depending on your market and well, how much it starts from. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed today's video. I've really enjoyed my day with this car, and hopefully I can get one for loan later and do some proper testing. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please drop me a thumbs up down below. And for more car content, please subscribe. See you guys later, and goodbye.